Welcome to this new automotive news video, the very first of this new week of March 30, 2026. Today, we're going to talk about Toyota since its boss has officially spoken out. To explain that, because of the current automotive crisis, several major car brands like Toyota could disappear. In the short or medium term, we'll talk about BMW, which wants to give another chance to an engine technology it had previously abandoned. We'll discuss the good news about the sharp rise in electric car production in France. These French-made cars aren't selling domestically, but are selling abroad. And finally, we'll discuss Skoda's first official details on its new large 7-seater SUV, the Peak. We'll cover all of this today, and I hope you find the video interesting. If that's the case, I'm counting on you as usual to show it by leaving a like, subscribing for upcoming videos, and boosting this one. If the option appears for you, that's really the most important thing if you want to give my channel more visibility. And of course, you can also leave a comment where you share your thoughts on today's news. Today, we'll discuss Toyota, a brand we rarely cover in our videos, because Toyota is a brand that doesn't make waves. It's a brand that makes reliable cars. And it's a brand with a pretty stable strategy, let's say. They've slowed their transition to electric cars in recent years, developing it gradually as the market expands. Despite a good strategy, strong reliability, and being one of the world's largest groups producing 10-11 million cars yearly, Toyota still faces challenges. And despite having rather solid finances, the director of Toyota held an official meeting in front of nearly 500 of the brand's suppliers, manufacturers who create parts or systems for equipment, later used to make famous Toyota cars. He explained clearly without beating around the bush, and I quote, "If nothing changes, we will not survive." What's happening is that, in reality, Toyota, like most other historic brands, is affected by a series of problems. Problems that are sometimes quite general, affecting pretty much all the historic brands. Tariffs in the United States, which cost them a lot in 2025 Chinese brands that are arriving almost everywhere in the world. Experiencing dizzying growth thanks to prices that are nearly unbeatable. Brands that, in addition, overwhelmingly dominate global battery production. More than 95% of electric cars sold in Europe have Chinese batteries, especially batteries from the Chinese giant CATL, but also a transition to electric cars, which forces Toyota to stretch itself, since in the American markets, people are asking for Toyota and Lexus with V6 or V8 engines, whereas in Europe, they're asking for electric cars to avoid fines. Go to problems that have unfortunately almost become normal for most of the historic brands. On top of all these problems, Toyota has to deal with some specific issues, and that's why its boss announced all this in front of the suppliers. It's that Toyota finds that the parts supplied by its equipment manufacturers and suppliers have decreased in quality. Because of this drop in quality, reliability problems are starting to multiply. And that's very serious because Toyota is a brand that built its reputation on reliability. If problems start happening even with them, who will be able to produce reliable cars for us? So at Toyota, we've seen a drop in vehicle quality due to the decline in the quality of its components. This decline, in addition to being damaging to the brand's reputation, is also extremely costly because Toyota had to increase the number of safety recalls, with cars that have to return to dealerships, or sometimes even back to the factory, so that these potential defects can be fixed, which is very, very expensive for the brands, and also very costly in terms of time. She explains that fixing defects that shouldn't appear on their cars took up part of their workforce, as well as their facilities, which prevented them from producing enough cars, and therefore from meeting delivery deadlines. Going so far as to say that if nothing changes, we won't survive. That might be seen as a bit extreme, but Toyota explains this statement by saying that currently, brands simply no longer have the right to make mistakes, and that in these times, the slightest mistake can be the last one and can push a brand toward bankruptcy. So Toyota called in these suppliers to make them understand that it was time for them to get their act together. That's why I think, to improve the quality of materials and prevent Toyota from potentially disappearing. You should know that Toyota on its side has also developed about a dozen initiatives, developed new platforms, but also streamlined the diversity of software and powertrains. Basically, Toyota will focus on fewer engines that work well and are reliable, rather than experimenting with technologies that it doesn't master as well, which could be costly for them, but also improving training programs. Because Toyota believes that a drop in component quality also comes from the fact that the workforce is less qualified than before. And it will also, and it's up to you to say what you think about that in the comments, to give themselves a slightly wider margin of error, especially through a program called Smart Standard Activity, a program designed to allow for a bit more margin of error when it comes to parts with minor defects. Until now, Toyota was really all about absolute perfection. Even a defect that was only cosmetic on a functional part could send it to scrap, but it costs money since you have to remake and reprocess the old part. That's why Toyota now wants to accept parts that have minor cosmetic defects, which are, once again, still functional. We're not talking about body parts, but for example, if there's a scratch on an interior component that the customer never sees. Different measures that should allow the brand to breathe a little financially and save some money. We'll see if it works or not. In any case, hearing Toyota, which is still a particularly realistic and especially serious brand, that, alarmed by the current situation of the automotive industry, means there really is a problem. Well, after that, there is still some good news. Today, it's confirmed that in France, the production of electric cars is experiencing good growth. According to figures from INSEE, the production of electric cars jumped by 74% in 2025 in France, compared to 2024. This increase can be partly explained by a modest starting point, since in 2024 there really weren't many electric cars produced in France, but it's also due to external demand. And that's quite interesting because most of these cars made in France actually go abroad. 63% of the electric cars produced in France are exported. The main customer is the United Kingdom, which accounts for a quarter of the exports, followed by Germany and the Netherlands. This is good news for the French automotive industry. We won't complain about making cars for other countries. On the other hand, when it comes to trade, you should know that in France, most of the electric cars that are bought are actually imported and not made in France. More than a third of them are made in Germany, 20% in China, and the rest in Slovakia, Morocco, Spain, and the Czech Republic. These numbers are easily explained by the fact that several French brands have chosen to have their bestsellers made abroad. The 208 is made in Spain, the C3 in Slovakia. We'll see if this positive trend continues in 2026 and in the years to come. Let me remind you that Renault, which is still one of the main manufacturers of electric cars in France, has already decided to move part of its production to Spain, which unfortunately could cause these good numbers to drop quite quickly. On the BMW side, they are reconsidering a powertrain technology that had previously been abandoned: range extenders. BMW was one of the first manufacturers to bring this technology to Europe, especially with the BMW i3 Rex. For range extender, let me remind you of the concept of a range extender. It's the opposite of a plug-in hybrid. That means it's an electric car with a combustion engine that works like a generator, creating electricity using gasoline on board the vehicle, all while driving to recharge the batteries in real time and boost the total range. It's a technology that BMW eventually abandoned, believing they would be able to make electric cars with long ranges. That's true, but it's true for models that are still quite high-end, like the iX3 or the i3. These aren't cars that everyone can afford. That's why they're reconsidering the choice to offer range-extended vehicles, allowing them to offer their customers, at lower prices, cars that are almost 100% electric with ranges nearly similar to those of a gasoline vehicle. On the other hand, it's a bit odd, by the way, because the first two vehicles that would come in range-extended versions wouldn't be particularly economical vehicles, since we're talking about a Rex version of the BMW X5, but also the Series 7, which is still the brand's top-of-the-line model. And there, we're talking well over 100,000 euros. BMW has officially communicated on the subject, explaining that, in fact, it was simply adapting to its market, that it didn't want to lose any customers, and that it was almost obliged, for that reason, to offer all types of engines in its lineup. And by the way, the brand also explained, that the main difficulty it was currently facing with the range extender was giving its vehicles a sporty character, because BMW is still the sporty premium brand, and the models with range extenders will have to maintain this sporty standard. That's not easy, since the battery and combustion engine make the cars heavier. Plus, it lacks the driving feel of a plug-in hybrid, which mainly uses its combustion engine. To finish, let's talk about Skoda, which is finally giving official information about its peak. It's their large 7-seater SUV, which is supposed to compete with everything like the Peugeot 5008. It's 4.86 meters long, that's 10 centimeters longer than the Skoda Kodiaq, which is currently the largest vehicle of the brand. It's based on the Volkswagen Group's MEB platform. It's available in 5 or 7-seat configurations with 2 foldable rear seats. Inside, you'll find a whole range of features, a 14-inch central screen, and some pretty high-quality materials. Considering the fact that Skoda isn't a particularly flashy brand, we're talking about leather, Alcantara, which suggests that the brand might be looking to move up market. On the audio side, there are 14 speakers plus a subwoofer, dual wireless chargers, and physical controls. And that's really nice because it's much more pleasant to use than touch controls. The storage space is quite large, 1,010 liters with the 2 rear seats folded down. It's compatible with V2L, which allows you to power electrical devices with the vehicle's battery, like a coffee maker or a PC. And it's compatible with one pedal. As for the engine, there are 2 versions, either rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. For now, Skoda has only made official a 286 horsepower version. And yet despite having quite a lot of power, it's actually pretty sluggish, since the 0 to 100 is announced at 7 seconds. That's not particularly impressive, especially for an electric car. It's only 1 second better than a 35D diesel 5 Series from the mid-2000 SA. That's because to reach 600 kilometers of range, Skoda had to fit it with a huge 90 kW battery. And because of that big battery, the announced weight of the Skoda Peak is between 2.4 and 2.8 tons. So let me tell you, in France, the day the weight penalty is applied to electric vehicles, it's going to be very complicated for it. As for charging speed, it'll be around $195, which is decent, but not particularly impressive. And as for the price, you'll still have to shell out quite a bit of cash, since it'll probably be between 55,000 and 65,000 euros, depending on the version. Knowing that, for now, Skoda hasn't given any official information about the price, but it's definitely not going to be cheap, that's for sure. And it's true that at that price, if you want maximum range in an electric car, well, once again, with Tesla, for 10 to 15,000 euros less, you can get it cheaper. You can get something better for less. We'll see how well it sells and what other Skoda Peak versions exist. Maybe we'll discuss entry-level ones in a video. In the meantime, I hope you found this video interesting. If that's the case, I count on you to show it by leaving a like and subscribing for future videos. You can also become a supporting member by clicking the join button below this one. See you tomorrow for March's final video. Ciao.